All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here and joining us. We're back again for our seventh and final, all good things have to come to an end at some point, series of virtual conversations that we are providing for leadership educators. I'm Vernon Wall, he, him pronouns. I am the Director of Business Development for LeaderShape. We've had over 2,300 people register to engage in our first six series actually, and we're excited to be back for round 7. The purpose of our time together really is to share questions, thoughts, and best practices as we continue to reimagine how we deliver engaging leadership programs to students through virtual platforms. So, we have to talk about our platform. We're just using Zoom. So, I mean, it's so interesting to have this slide up because I don't know who has not been on a Zoom experience in the last year and a half. However, just want to let you know for this opportunity, we're just asking folks to post your comments and questions in the chat area. We're at that number where we could have folks unmute and ask questions if you want. And we also have an opportunity in the chat box. In the past, the chat box has been very robust. Not only having folks ask questions, but also to talk with each other and share resources. So let's have it be as robust as you want it to be in terms of reflecting and thinking about the things that are happening. You can also send me a private message or our guest moderator, either way. We want to begin by sharing our land acknowledgement. LeaderShape would like to begin this presentation by acknowledging that the land each of us is on today is the original homeland of indigenous and tribal nations. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced removal from these territories, and we honor and respect the many diverse indigenous peoples still connected to this land. Please honor and acknowledge the Native and indigenous peoples from the land that you are joining us from, and give thought to your ancestry and the generations that came before you. I'm joining you actually from Washington, D.C., the ancestral homelands of many Native and indigenous peoples, but primarily the Anacostic and the Piscataway. For those of you who are new to LeaderShape, we are a not-for-profit that actually, our vision is about a just, caring, and thriving world where all lead with integrity and a healthy disregard for the impossible. Our mission is to transform the world by increasing the number of people who lead with integrity and a healthy disregard for the impossible. So if you Google the term leadership, most of us know that you will have millions of hits. At LeaderShape, we believe that leadership involves living in a state of possibility, making a commitment to a vision, developing relationships to move vision into action, and sustaining a high level of integrity. Effective leadership takes place in the context of community and results in a more equitable society. I am so excited to welcome LeaderShape's very own Executive Director, Kristen Young, who has agreed to assist us in the facilitation of this conversation. Kristen's full bio is in the description that was sent out with the presentation, but I'm gonna ask her to take a moment to say hello and introduce herself to you now.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Vernon. It's so hard to believe that we've done 7 of these series, by the way. I just wanna pause and just really thank Vernon for his idea in doing this when we first started to think about, what could we do during this time to engage and keep the community of leadership educators together. This was Vernon's idea, and what a gift I think it has been to the community of leadership educators to continue to meet regularly to talk about topics that have been interesting and relevant during this time. So thank you, my friend, for doing this for us. So for those of you that don't know me, I am excited to just spend some time with you all today. Vernon mentioned I have just the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of LeaderShape. I have been on the LeaderShape staff for almost 17 years. July 4th will actually be my 17-year anniversary. I don't know if I get like a pen set or something after that. I'm not sure. Maybe a new water cup, but In that time, I've had lots of a variety of roles, in all working with promoting our programs, developing our programs, and helping us meet and achieve our mission and vision. In October of 2019, I was appointed the interim executive director, and then in October of 2020, I was selected for that role permanently. So while the role is new to me, LeaderShape as an organization is not. And if you know me, you know that LeaderShape has my heart, as it is an organization I care very deeply about. My background itself is in higher education. I worked briefly on a college campus before joining the LeaderShape staff. But really, when I think about it, my passion is really helping people be the best versions of themselves and embrace the possibilities that each of us hold. And so I try to do that here in my work at LeaderShape, in my volunteer work outside of that, and within my family. I am married and have two young children. JJ is 7 and Olivia is 5. You may see them at some point during this Zoom conversation today because they think it's super fun. Olivia in particular, JJ not so much. They do love a good Zoom call, so they may show up for us. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me, and I'm just excited to be here today.
Thanks, Kristen. We've asked we always ask our facilitators to share some polling questions with us to kind of get a sense for what's going on as we enter this conversation. Today we're going to talk about maintaining focus in blurry times, holding a place for possibility. So our first poll, let me get it ready. Launch poll. Woo. It's the end of the semester and I am feeling exhausted, energized.
People were very quick to hit the button.
No delay in that one.
No.
Hey.
No.
All right. Couple more folks. So nobody's really feeling energized.
No.
Nobody's feeling energized.
I get it. I feel you. I get it.
I think this is good. We'll end this.
Good.
So it looks like most folks are all of the above.
All of the above.
All of the above. There's some exhausted. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's good to know we're kind of in this together, right? There's this collective feeling of exhaustion and uncertainty and gratefulness and being energized and holding all of those. And I think we've probably been holding all of those for more than a year as well. But I think every time, for me at least, when I think about the end, right, the end of the semester, it triggers for me a time to reflect and think about, how am I feeling? How did I make it through this period of time, and what is ahead? And hopefully that's a little bit about what we'll talk about today.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think I'll just kind of jump into the content. What do you think, Vernon? Sound good?
Go.
Okay. So, when Vernon asked me to talk about possibility and staying focused during kind of these times, I really hesitated. And because, it's hard to tell Vernon no to something, but I was like, it's hard for me to talk about something when I'm in the process of doing it. Maybe like some of you, I'm a solver. I like to be done with something before I really share my process with people and talk about it. But and when I do that, I'd rather talk about the good and the bad in that process, right? Not that it has to be perfect or that I have to have it all figured out, but I want it to be finished and complete. And I've learned lots of lessons over the course of this year, as I'm sure all of us have. But one of those is that this isn't a time to finish a process, right? There is so much still uncertainty happening as we navigate the multiple pandemics that are happening around us and to us, that we don't have time to stop and pause and then share what we're learning, that it is really valuable to share what we're learning as we're going through the process. And I find that I'm constantly refocusing myself and trying to hold on to that pace of possibility as I navigate my day-to-day work. And I hope that as I talk with you all today, that I can share a little bit of what I've learned on my journey, and that you can learn from that, and that through the chat feature and through our conversation that you all can share a little bit about what you're learning, right? Because we are all navigating this blurry time. And hopefully we're holding all some degrees of possibility. And that's really where I want to talk to you all about is how do we hold that possibility during a time of uncertainty? Because no one can tell when the navigation of a health pandemic will end, but I'm pretty certain that there will be other blurry times that lie ahead for all of us. Because even as I reflect back, there have been other times in my career and in my personal life where things have been blurry. This wasn't that itself wasn't new. What we dealt with was very new. And so I hope that we can share that as we go along in our conversation today. And I am reminded too of the fact, just from your poll questions, I would have answered all of the above as well. Probably more on the exhausted and tired side, less on the energized side. But there have been moments of great energy as I wrap up the semester as well. And so I'm learning to kind of savor those, I think. So I want to share with you all first this quote in difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. When I thought first about what is a blurry time, or how do you define kind of a blurry time, this quote came to my mind. So I mentioned earlier that in October of 2019, I was appointed the interim executive director of LeaderShape. At that time, LeaderShape as an organization was starting to see some decline in the number of programs that we provided for college students. And we began to wonder and question, what is our purpose as an organization? Are we meeting the needs of college students and professionals in the way that we can? And I thought then that it was a little bit of a blurry time. It was difficult. And I shared this quote with our staff. We really began to think about what that meant. And we knew that even in that difficult time, that there were beautiful destinations ahead. We knew what was coming, right? We knew our values as an organization. I knew my values as an individual and as a leader. And so I felt comforted by that. So while it was blurry, I still knew where we were going, if that makes sense. I don't know if anyone else can kind of relate to that. Maybe raise your hand if you can, or put something in the chat if you can. And then 2020, March of 2020 came around, and Vernon, you and I were together at ACPA. Some of the others of you were there with us as well. And there was this rumbling of some virus that was going around that seemed pretty serious. And I'm pretty sure, Vernon, that we kind of laughed about it. Like, what's it going to do, right? Like, we were in a training right after ACPA. We were in a training with a group of our co-lead facilitators for the Institute. And there were maybe 25 of us there in that space. And there were numerous conversations of like, yeah, this is just kind of blown out of proportion. People were getting calls from their campuses. People were starting to wonder and panic. But at the same time, we were like, how bad could it be? It's just going to blow over, right? Vernon, do you remember when we were there and having those conversations? It seems like forever ago.
Yeah, I could not. I remember, it was just one of those things where no one knew what was happening. I felt so detached because I wasn't, and the news really wasn't sharing much. So it was just,
right.
Yeah, it was definitely a detachment piece. Yeah.
It was a strange time, right? And maybe some of you all were there or kind of remember that time in the spring in March of 2020. And it wasn't, I felt kind of like this picture. So it was blurry, right? And it was also really out of focus because I didn't know where my time and attention should be during that time. Like, should I be watching the news? Should I be following all of the stories that were coming out? Or should I just continue to go about my regular everyday task and responsibilities? And I felt kind of like this picture. And so we came back from ACPA, like some of you did as well, and worked for a couple of days, and all of a sudden we were making decisions to work remotely, to close our office, to change the way in which we worked. We heard about students like you all, Lindsay, students on spring break trips, calling them back from their spring break trips. We were doing sessions of the LeaderShape Institute, and we were talking to campuses about ending those conversations that picked up in the matter of an instant, right? And yeah, Kelsey, you were there with your students. So, right, matter of an instant, everything changed. And so not only did it go from blurry, but it went to a place of total shock. And the one thing that there's many things that I remember from this time, but the one thing that I very distinctly remember is the day that we decided to close the LeaderShape office for the 2 weeks that we thought that it would be. I sent everybody home. Vernon was working remotely, but Abby was in the office, and Kim and Sarah and Pam, our accountant, we all came in that morning and got all of our stuff, and they all left, and I kind of stayed behind in our office just to pick up my own things and be there for just a little bit. And as I got ready to leave, I sat down. We had a front lobby in the office, and I sat down in the office and I started to cry. And I don't know that I've even actually told you this, Vernon or Abby. I don't think I've ever told you this, but I sat there, and I'm not a crier, so y'all, I'm not. But I, as I think about it, I didn't know what had come over me in those moments, but there was something inside of me that was telling me that this was going to be different, that there was something that was happening here that was unlike anything that I had ever thought of or prepared for. And I think that I share this because I think that in our blurry times, it's really important to listen to our gut. And my gut was telling me that something big is about to happen, something that I couldn't be prepared for, and it wasn't going to be good, right? It wasn't going to be good. And so, in that really quiet moment, I made that decision that regardless of what was coming ahead, how uncertain it was, and I didn't know what it was, that I would still show up for the people that I cared about, for the organization that I cared for the people that I was leading, for my family. Um, I was just going to be present. And I don't know that I didn't vocalize that, but I did in my own internal conversation made that choice that I was going to be here. I wasn't going to miss it, and I wasn't going to bow out. And I'm not saying that to say that I was going to be perfect in that. I was just going to be there and show up. And I think as I think about how we navigate blurry times and hold possibility, making that decision to show up is crucial. That really, and when I say that, it definitely isn't like show up and have it all together. It's just to show up and to be human and to be imperfect and to try our very best to navigate that, recognizing that it's going to mean something different for everybody. But for me, that was one of the very pivotal moments during the beginning of the pandemic, and then throughout it still continues to be something I reflect back on and think about is how do I show up? How do I show up for the people I care most about and the causes and organizations I lead? So that, I ask you to kind of think of that and hold that and what that might mean for each of you as you think about how do you navigate uncertainty and change. And this kind of blurry picture continued to stay in the way I saw life for a really long time, and I think it's the way a lot of us saw life for a very long time. Early on would talk to the staff, and they probably got tired of me hearing about this, about having routines. I was adamant that we would meet every day and develop a routine for how we talked to each other and how we communicated, because in uncertainty, I wanted us to have one thing that was consistent. And I did that in other areas of my life too. I did that with my family. I did that with my friends of like, how do we establish new routines and new habits that we could count on, because the stuff around us is not going to be something that we can count on. There will be things that will come at us throughout all courses of the day that I wanted some foundation and some stability, because I like that. And maybe some of you are like me. I like a little bit of stability, right? And during that time, I found that I really, really needed it. And I hoped that other people that I was leading and working with benefited from that. And I made that choice over and over again to continue to show up, right? And to be intentional in those interactions. And so that became my kind of way of operating. And it continued on for a really long time, right? So we're still in this part of a blurry time and a blurry pandemic, and things continue to unfold, and we continue to make choices, kind of one foot in front of the other. And in April of 2021, so just a couple of months ago, I read an article, and I'm going to put it in the chat for you all as well. It was in the New York Times, and it was called "The Name for the Blah You're Feeling." I don't know if anyone else had read this article or saw this article going around in the New York Times, um, but I found great comfort in this article. And in this article, and if you did read it, and it looks like a couple people have, I'd love for you all to talk about in the chat, like what about it you might have, what it might have read, what might have resonated with you. For me, it was knowing, and this article talked about this blah feeling, and it describes the part in the middle as languishing. And I'd never heard of the term languishing. I'm not an English major. So this is not my background. I had not heard of this term, but it described this term languishing as what you feel like in the middle, from thinking about our emotional well-being and mental health, from depression to flourishing. There's this middle part called languishing. And as someone who has mental health and has battled depression for a number of years, I found great comfort in knowing that what I was dealing with and what I was facing had a name to it. Because for months, I had been doing all of the things I'd known to do for years and years and years, talking to my counselor, taking my medication, but yet nothing was working until I read this article, and I was like, oh, because I'm not dealing with depression. I'm dealing with this blah feeling in the middle of blurriness and languishing. And they gave this as the definition: a sense of stagnation and emptiness. It feels as if you're muddling through your days, looking at your life through a foggy windshield.
Mm.
And so when I read that, I was like, that is how I felt through 2020. That is exactly how I felt in 2020. I would love to hear from you all, if this definition, what about it might resonate with you? And I see a couple people saying it was nice to have that feeling normalized. Absolutely, absolutely. Vernon, had you heard that, or had you read that article?
I have not. And I mean, I'm just thinking, aha, okay. Because for me, I look at it as like March and April were good for me because I kept myself busy. I was focused on projects. Um, and I think it was the end of April when I started to not see light at the end of the tunnel is when I felt that I moved into the languishing space.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
was like, this isn't ending yet.
No,
It's
it
not.
it
Can't.
really wasn't.
Right. And then there were other, and then, multiple pandemics. And when we had, racial injustice, that layered on top of COVID, and violence against transgender folks. I mean, it was really an interesting space to be in. And I really didn't think about it until, yeah.
It really, and I hadn't either, right? Like, and I think so much of 2020 we spent being reactionary, right? There was crisis after crisis, and so we as professionals, both on campus and off campus, were having to just adapt so quickly that I mean, it was a blur because of the pace in which we were all working, and I know that from partnering with all of you on campus and just hearing of how you've had to adapt to meeting the needs of students. But then by the time March 2021 rolled around, and we've been doing this for a year, you can't work at that pace for that long. Like, our bodies are not made to do that. And that's, I think, when I turned to this and found this article about languishing, that I was like, right, absolutely, because it did slow down, right? We did we weren't in a hyper sense of reaction.
Mhm.
And we were able to pause a little bit more. And then I absolutely felt that start of languish, probably starting around February of 2021 for me, of like, oh, because we're still here, right? We're still here. So
Well,
I'm gonna look at. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I love Courtney's comment around not doing bad per se, but not doing great. And,
Right.
and that was, I mean, and I remember thinking I'm actually okay, but then I realized okay may not be great, but I thought that okay was okay, and I thought,
Hmm.
and it wasn't until I became honest with myself and said, yeah, just not doing bad is not all that great either. So what does that mean? And yeah. So that's good. I love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Lindsay, we're going to talk a little bit about this. Trying to live in a state of possibility, right? But with so much unknown, there's almost too many possibilities, right? So how do you decide? And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to share a little bit about how we've decided and how I decided, I think, in collaboration with everyone here at LeaderShape. But you get overwhelmed, and it's like asking the question of, where do you want to go out to dinner? And everyone's like, well, I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want? I mean, there's just so many options that at the end of the day, it's 2 hours later and everyone's starving and you're eating peanut butter and jelly, right? So I think there were many moments like that during this time, and there still are, as there is still a lot of uncertainty that we're facing. So for me, when I think about this, this is a picture again, right? So knowing that there was a definition, knowing that there was an understanding of what I had been feeling and how I'd been interacting, there was more clarity, but things are still blurry, right? So as we think about that, it's still the path ahead, just like we're saying, is still blurry. And yes, and the article from the New York Times shared, it helped to take small steps, right? Doing small things, small victories, small. As small as like, here's my like little to-do list every day, and it's important to me. I'm a list person, so maybe you're like me, but every day I want to check these things off. There are 5 things I've committed to doing every day in my work, and so I'm going to make sure that I get those 5 things done. Now, there were some days that it takes me a lot longer to do 5 things than I ever wanted to or expected, but getting that small victory helped to keep moving forward, helped to give me that momentum as and maybe many of you balance working virtually, educating young children virtually, meeting my family virtually, right? Like all of that changing. And so really being able to do those things and reminding myself of what I knew to be true, and kind of embracing the new realities, right? So I know, and we talked about this a lot as a staff at LeaderShape. We know to be true that the work that we do matters, right? And you all know this on your campuses as well, right? You know that the work that you do, the programs that you provide for students, you know that those matter. It gets lost sometimes in the uncertainty because you're being asked to do your programming differently. You're being asked to say, well, does it matter? Does it matter if we do commencement? Does it matter if we do our end of the year virtual award ceremony? And you begin to think, well, maybe it doesn't, right? Maybe it doesn't. Well, it does, right? And so maybe just the way in which we need to go about it might change, but the work that we do matters. And so reminding myself of that time and time again continues to be very, very important. And one of the ways that I even do that is by looking back at old pictures of work that we do. Like I will go onto our little picture drive and I will look at past sessions of LeaderShape Institutes. I will read feedback from participants as a reminder to say, I don't want to lose sight of that. So I don't know what that is for you all in your offices, but if it's, I remember when I worked on a college campus, I had pictures of all of our past retreats up in my office, like looking at those and reminding myself that those are important. I think were some of the things that helped me in those small steps. The other thing that really helped me is a LeaderShape principle. So one of the things that I didn't share with you all is that not only have I've been on the LeaderShape staff for a while, I also participated as a college student in the Institute. So like it or not, what we teach was foundational to how I became a leader and what I knew about leadership. So I attended as a 20-year-old college student who didn't really think of herself as much of a leader. But one of the things that we talk about is how do we practice a healthy disregard for the impossible? You saw it in our vision and mission statement. We talk about it all the time. And it's something nice to talk about. And somebody mentioned it earlier, that there's so many possibilities. But during this time, I had 100 reasons every day while I wasn't going to practice a healthy disregard for the impossible. Like, I mean, and some of them were just like basic. Like they were like, I'm not going to practice healthy disregard for the impossible because I live and work with 2 people under the age of 8 in my house. Like I don't have time to think about impossible. The possibility is they are going to eat me out of house and home because I just feed them. I'm a nonstop cafeteria, right? Like these things that became my everyday reality all of the time were one of the 100 reasons that I could not think in this way. But then when I really thought more about that and stopped and paused and reflected, I realized that many of them were driven by fear. Many of those 100 reasons of why I didn't want to practice a healthy disregard were driven by fear. It was the fear of failure. It was the fear of succeeding. It was the fear of what others might think. And oftentimes I was also just exhaustion, right? Right. We are all navigating so much more during this time. And so at that moment, like when I think about that and I think about the healthy disregard for the impossible, I remembered back to that day when I was sitting in the office and I said I would show up. And so when I make the decision to show up, when you make the decision to show up every day, no matter what, I have to listen to the fears, but I don't have to let the fears drive and make the decisions for how I act. Right? I have to recognize that I hold those fears. They hold a place in what I'm doing and who I am, but they can't be the driver of my decisions, right? Because I already made the decision months ago to still show up, right? And so how do I do that and continue to say, I'm here, I'm present. And as difficult as it is, whatever hard decision we might have to make today, and we did. As a leader of the organization, I had to make very difficult decisions, and many of you had probably faced those as well, right? Decisions about staffing, decisions about how to work, decisions about programs to do or not to do, things that might have been considered sacred cows of an organization. We all have those things, right? I had them in my personal life as well. Decisions about how to interact with family, how not to interact with family, how to celebrate momentous life moments and how not to celebrate them. So, I had to just continue to not let that fear be the guiding decision, and to hold tight to possibility thinking. And this is the definition of possibility thinking that we have been using in some of our LeaderShape programs during the time of the pandemic, saying that possibility thinking is the willingness to see beyond the limitations and identify broader opportunities to embrace the possibilities that abound. And that possibility thinking is steeped in hope and is unencumbered by how things are supposed to be. And I don't know about you all, and I know, Vernon, we've talked about this so often in the past year and a half. I've just said, this is not how it's supposed to be. It's not how it's supposed to be. But yet here it is, right? And so when we let that go, I think then we are opening ourselves up to the possibilities that are around and allowing ourselves to embrace that feeling. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to have we have another polling question I've talked a lot at you. And so want to hear a little bit more from you all as you think about possibility thinking and what that means for each of you. What holds you back from possibility thinking? Okay.
It looks like we got it, most folk.
Yeah, I think we got most people, right? Eva, thank you for adding that in the chat there. And what you're right, it wasn't an option in the poll, but a lack of courageous leaders and supervisors, absolutely a barrier, right? I totally understand. I sit in a role of privilege, right? Being an executive director of an organization, I get to be in that place of leadership. But I think it also, I couldn't have done it without the people that I'm surrounded with in our staff and in the people that I work with. But it absolutely, that creates a giant barrier. Looks like other folks, uncertainty and lack of resources or lack of time. Because you just want to move. We know what we need to get done, right? And sometimes possibility thinking is going to take us in a different direction. It's going to take more time, more resources, and we're uncertain of its results, uncertain of the process of how to do it, and how to navigate through that.
Yeah, as I'm thinking about just the possibility pieces and some of the comments around supervisors and leaders in organizations, I'm worried that as we move post-COVID, we're gonna forget the lessons learned and the possibility thinking that we had. Because if we sit back and think about the things that we did in order to, in higher education, survive, it was tough, but there was a lot of possibility thinking going on. And there's a lot of creativity. I always use the example of, this was sort of in the middle of COVID. I remember when restaurants started to open up a little bit. I remember going to a restaurant by myself, and I sat at a table, and they brought up a little machine that basically, on that machine, I paid for my meal. There was a barcode that I used on my tab, and it just basically brought up my my receipt. I put a tip on it, put my credit card in, done. I didn't even in any way interact with a server except that person who brought me the food. So I'm thinking, wow, that technology has been around and used sort of sporadically, but our time and our context had us use it more. And so my sense is that we wouldn't go back. That restaurant is not going to go back from that, I don't think, because that's a move. So I don't know. I'm just thinking about what we're going to be, how we're going to be after.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think about that a lot because we are learning so much about how to work, how to navigate community, how to be in community with each other, how to continue to engage in conversation, how to work differently. Like if you would have said to, and I was talking to someone recently that was a vice president for student affairs, and they were talking about how if you had said, we need you to do all of your classes online remotely starting in 2 weeks, go ahead. People would have been like, absolutely no, I'm not going to do it. It would have taken years to figure out how to do it. There'd be a lot of processes involved. Instead of, in this moment, we had 2 weeks and we had to do it. Like there wasn't an option. And so how much of what we did during the past year and a half and will continue to do is because there isn't another option. The way we used to do it isn't going to work anymore. It's not a viable option. And so what else can we do to still provide services to the students that we serve? And we talked about this a lot at LeaderShape, right? As an organization up until 2020 that only did in-person programming, that is all that we did. We never did anything virtually with students or professionals. We went to your campuses, we sat in rooms with everybody, we sat face to face and had conversations. You can imagine that in April of 2020, we were all like, I don't know what else to do. Right? This is all we know. And so how do we then take all we know and think about what's good about what we do, and now what is the new way in which we can operate, right? And what will we hold true, and how do we what were the things? And I think this is important when we think about how do we hold a place for possibility. It's really important to think about what are the values that we want to transcend time or space, right? And so for us at LeaderShape, and for me as leading the organization, it's really about integrity and community, right? Those are hallmark principles that we talk about at LeaderShape, that regardless of how we gather together, those things are important to us. And so how do I make sure that in a new space, in a new environment, those things still translate?
Well, I love Lindsay's comment because, I love what I think about when I read that. I think about, how many times do we not choose possibility?
Right.
Given a choice, we typically choose something that is not as difficult for us, because possibility is tough. But if you don't have an option, you choose possibility. You go, okay, guess I'm gonna try this. So that really is a good point that, there are many times when there's conversations about us moving to a place of possibility, and someone in the room will be the naysayer or the person that, quote unquote, well, I just want to be realistic. No, well, okay, I'm cool with that, but I'm also want to make sure that I'm pushing myself to think about possibility.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then to think about as we hold that place of possibility, how are we really embracing that and putting in the work then to
Mhm.
put in the effort to make it happen, right? And so and really make taking that possibility and putting it into action, I think is really important.
Mhm.
And it is really interesting to think that when given the choice, of course I don't want to choose possibility. It's so uncertain and uncomfortable, and I
Mhm.
don't really often want to be in those places. But in 2020 we were in that place all the time, no matter what. And I think about then too, throughout the course of the last year and a half, think about how much kindness and grace we gave to each other
Mhm.
because we were all facing the same thing together. And so, when technology didn't work the first time we tried to do virtual series, or the technology didn't work in a classroom, people
Mhm.
were like, oh, I get it. We're learning something new, right? So let's just do the best that we can and we'll move forward. There was no, putting people down or, back talking. There was a collective, okay, we're all going to figure this out together. And next time it'll just be different because we're learning something new. And I appreciated watching that and being a part of that, being the receiver of that as well. And I saw it a lot. And some of you, if you have small children or children in elementary school, I saw that a lot with teachers. So to have for the first part of the school year, my children were all completely remote and virtual, and so to see even children give that grace to their teachers while
Mhm.
they tried to learn. So my second grader figured out how to use Zoom, but his teacher didn't. So you heard second graders say, Miss So and so, you just press that green button. You just press the green button. And so
Uh-huh.
then they'd find, and I was like, right, because it goes back to this principle of, which I think is really important as we think about possibility, is that, and I mentioned it at the beginning, we're all teachers and we're all learners, right? And so when we have that mentality, then embracing possibility thinking also is easier because there isn't the fear that if I fail, if I don't do it correctly the first time, I'm going to be judged for it.
Mhm.
And I think that's important.
Mhm.
And still, I think my kindergarten daughter knows how to use Zoom better than I do. But that's, story for another time. So then as we think about, as you think about this and taking this applicable to the work that you do, and, I wanted to give you this kind of visual of how do you hold a place for possibility? How do you keep an eye out for spotting opportunities? How do you keep your brain full of ideas? So during this last year and a half, I mean, I've written down more ideas in my notebook of like, ooh, we could always do this. What if we did this? But that question of what if we did this? And I've kept them all and I will continue to go back to them because maybe they'll solve a problem at another time, right? Maybe that idea wasn't the right idea for right now, but maybe it's a good idea for down the line. And being able to keep my brain full of ideas helped me not be so focused on what I couldn't do. Right. And so much in this time of uncertainty, in a time of pandemic, we continue to hear about what we couldn't do, right? We couldn't go into restaurants. We couldn't meet in person. We couldn't, the list can go on and on. But when I had that brain full of ideas, I could think of, well, what could I do? Right. So what could I do? I could take my children outside and we could decorate on and wish our neighbors happy birthday in chalk because they couldn't come out. Right. Like schools could have drive-by parades. Like who ever thought of a drive-by birthday party? Like never before had I seen drive-by birthday parties, but they were all over social media and probably in your neighborhoods as well during the pandemic. But never before would I have thought of a drive-by parade. So holding that idea, that brain full of ideas, and then a stomach for trusting your gut. Going back to what I said earlier at the very beginning, like I knew this was going to be different. Something within me knew it was going to be different and it wasn't going to be good,
Mhm.
right? And so to trust that, to have a heart that's focused on your values and keeping those in alignment, to have a thick skin to cope with the lows, because I mean there were many a day where I mean it's dark and dreary and I'm wearing sweatpants and like you're looking at all the paper on the desk and going, I don't know how we're going to make it, right? Not
Mhm.
sure what's going to lie ahead. And so, how to recognize and have that thick skin to cope with those lows, but not to focus on them. And then to have, I appreciated having dancing feet to celebrate the wins, right? And I'm not always the best at that because I'm very focused on like, what should we be doing? But thankful for Abby and Vernon and Tanya and the other leadershapers who are like, we're going to celebrate. Like, we made it. We figured out how to do one new thing today. Like, let's celebrate. Let's get together and have that celebration, even if it is just on Zoom. So not to forget that piece, because that is so important. And hopefully you all are starting to see that as you wrap up your semesters, that you're celebrating what you did accomplish. It might not have been what you thought you were going to accomplish, because none of 2020 or even 2021 was what I thought we were going to accomplish. But gosh, what we did accomplish was pretty amazing and awesome.
Well, and I remember during some of our first staff Zoom calls, where once a week we would have a theme. And
Yeah, we would.
like one time it was wear a t-shirt with your favorite band. Um,
Mhm.
and I mean, that was something that was important. I think about that and think about that sustained us. It really did for
Right.
me.
Yeah.
And I think about the creativity of students. I know
Yeah.
that I would read, I tell folks all the time, you know, during the pandemic, every morning for 30 minutes, I would read the email that the Chronicle of Higher Education would send out, the Chronicle in brief. And it would
Mhm.
sort of, give you great sort of updates on what's going on different campuses. And some of the creativity in students around masking and the campaigns around um, making sure that we were taking care of each other in community. Those things, I mean, once again, student affairs folk, step up,
Right.
and now more than ever, it was so wonderful to see some of the creative things. I know at University of Maryland, they had, I think, ambassadors walking around who had masks and were giving people masks if they needed them, and answering questions. Yeah, I mean, just that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, right. It's just, thinking and focusing on that is the possibility piece, right? And I think then it goes to, and I'll leave you all with these kind of guiding questions. I know we're kind of getting close to the end of our time. I want to make sure there is time for people to ask questions if they have them. But as you think about, embracing this possibility mindset, here are just 4 questions to kind of think about is, how can you hold a place for possibility while facing the realities of life, right? It doesn't mean I held possibility in all aspects of what we were doing. So, just as many of you in your own offices, I didn't hold the place of possibility in our financial status. Like that for me is not a place where I want to be a
Mhm,
possibility thinker.
mhm.
So I was a reality thinker when it came to the money piece of what we are doing. But in other areas, I could be a possibility thinker in terms of our programming and how we interacted with students and how we interacted with staff. Because and so it doesn't mean just when I'm a possibility thinker that I just, oh, possibility all of the time, right? So how do you have to be able to hold both. And I think that's important.
Well, and I think these questions actually allow us to see the difference between toxic positivity and
Hmm.
possibility. Because I think
Yeah.
a lot of times we confuse the two. And for me,
Hmm.
toxic positivity is around saying things like, "Oh, everything happens for a reason," or "This too shall pass." I mean,
Right.
in itself, those terms, those sayings are can be helpful, and they can also move to a place of not acknowledging individuals and the struggles that happen as we move through life,
Right.
based on our
Right.
identity or who we are in the world. And there's a total difference, I believe, and that's why I love these questions. They really focus on what possibility looks like.
Right. Right. And recognizing that in a situation, depending on my identities as well, possibility might look different for
Hmm.
each individual. Right. And so for me to hold possibility thinking as the executive director of an organization looks very different than if I were serving in a different role as well. Right. So positionality matters, right, in that. And so really thinking through that. And it'd be, and I think we've talked about this as a leadership staff, but something for us to continue to talk about is, what does possibility thinking mean to each individual, right? And because
Hmm.
it does mean something different to each of us. And then recognizing when there are times where you're like, I just can't think about possibility right now, like I want to just be in the harsh reality of life,
Hmm.
and it has kicked me to the curb, and I am going to sit here for a little while, right? And that is okay too, right? And so it's not an all or nothing piece, which I think sometimes when you mention toxic positivity, Vernon, I feel like sometimes that's an all or nothing, right? Like I'm just so positive and I'm not recognizing the other pieces.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So it's being realistic about it. It's being realistic. And then, so as you think about those, and we can come back to these questions as if we have a few moments, but really, as you think about those, hopefully these help you engage in that conversation with the people that you are working with the teams that you're a part of, with the families that you're a part of, and that the picture becomes blurrier, or less blurry, not blurry, it becomes less blurry, right? So this is my picture, right? This is the picture of, if I could sum up 2020, 2021 in a picture, it would be this. So it is LeaderShape, and this is my family. So that, they have not shown up on our Zoom call. Don't tell Olivia. It's amazing. But I can say now that there are moments, many more moments of clarity, and it is less blurry. But I can go back and forth, right? Depending on where we are and what's happening. But having this time of reflection personally, as a leader, as a person, as a parent, as a partner, being able to do that personal reflection, and knowing that there are terms and help and people that I can talk to along the way, that can help the blurry times come to be less blurry, at least have for me. And the last thing I want to share with you before we have any questions is this really great quote I found the other day from Oprah. I really think she and I are best friends. I know a lot of people think that about Oprah, but I'm pretty sure she just writes these things for me. So I thought that this really summed up for me what, as we think about how to maintain focus in those blurry times, is really thinking about, in the moment, like she says here, in this moment, we found a way to step into higher ground, right? And recognizing that it is a moment by moment, step by step journey, as we think about how to navigate uncertainty and hold possibility at the same time. So with that, in a couple of minutes left, I'd love to know from you all if you have any questions. I know, Vernon, if you have any questions or other thoughts.
Well, definitely, folks, if folks want to, put any reflections or thoughts as we wrap up. I know that, the concept of possibility is really in the fabric of who we are at LeaderShape. And, I think about the fact that folks who come to life from historically marginalized groups, for me, I think about the fact that if it wasn't for possibility or possibility thinking, I don't know where we would be. Because think of the history of oppression in our world and our country, and how it really is about folks holding on to possibility. And that's why this, I think, resonates so well with so many people, is because that's who we are as people. We look to that. And sometimes we need to be encouraged to not let go of the possibility thinking. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's something too that I've reminded myself that it's also something that we have in common, right? So it's one of those pieces that and as I think about this, like, all of our ancestors wanted our lives to be better than the ones that they had, right? So, my grandmother and Vernon's grandmother could get together in a room, and they would talk about how they would want our lives to be better than theirs were, right? And we have lots of differences in our physical appearance and how we navigate the world, but those things are still common, right? And so how do we remember that as we go through this space and think about possibility? Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen.
You're welcome.
Always a joy to have a conversation, especially around something that I know that you feel very passionate about, and that is living in possibility and what that looks like. Just for folks to know, we will, this has been recorded, so we'll be sending out the link for folks, and please share it with others if you like. Wouldn't be a LeaderShape experience if we didn't end with letting you know that we do have some both virtual and now in person, as we move toward the fall, programs that we're happy to have conversations with you. Just shoot us a quick email or connect with us. We're so happy. We really are excited to get back on campus in some way. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone that LeaderShape is ready to come to campus.
Ready.
We're ready. Also too, would love to let you know that we are not for profit. And if you feel that if you have the resources, we'd love for you to assist us as we continue to make our vision become a reality. And so if that's something you can do, or share this link with others, we would love to have you support us in whatever way you can. So thank you all so much for joining.
Thank
you again,
you.
Kristen. You are amazing. I don't only say that because you're my boss. I say that because you're. Thanks, everyone, and have a
Thank you
great
all.
day.
Thank you.
Hey, good thing. I forgot at the beginning to tell folks to put their names in the chat. I forgot all about that. Sorry.
Oh, I did too. That's okay.
Yeah,
It's been a while since we've done this, it seems like.
Yeah, it's the only thing I forgot. So cool. Good job.
Good.
Awesome stuff.
Thanks. Was it good?
And I've not seen that new. I'm thankful for sharing the New York Times.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna click on that link right now before we go, so I can have
It's a great article. I read it and I was like, they see me. They know. Like this is like a real thing. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
I don't remember who shared it first. I feel like Daniel Ostick might have shared it first on Facebook. That I might have been where I saw it.
Oh, he may have. I'm mad at him right now anyway, so.
Why?
Because he's like, I was like, are you going to be on the facilitator call that's coming up? He's like, what's facilitator call? I'm like, oh my God. And so we talked, so he'll be there. And then also, I was Kristen Salenti Skendel, and the three of us had lunch. It was so good to catch up with Kristen.
I miss her.
And we mentioned it her too. She's like, I don't think I got anything. I'm like, yes, you did. So I'm going to send them a link to make sure but we haven't sent out the big email.
We haven't sent out, it'll go out today. The big email will go out today or this evening. So at some point. Okay. But then you can go get on people to.
I told them, I said, you got to save the date, didn't you? And they were like, oh yeah, probably. I'm like, oh gosh. Because actually, I'm excited. I mean, folks are really talking about the fact that now they can kind of hone in on very specific experiences. So
good.
And because they may not have time to go to a campus and do a 4-day. But because Daniel was saying, oh, I'd love to do some virtual things for you. I'm like, of course.
Great. Well, it's funny. I was talking to Melissa Rocco yesterday. She's still in London. Yep. And she's like, wait, I could facilitate. I was like, yeah, that would be great. Yeah. I think it'll be good. I did, I'll send the link out today, and I'll have some application stuff for you all to look at here probably tomorrow. Sandy and I met this morning to figure out how we're going to get people to give us their information. So I think we got it. I think we got it figured out.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Well, Kristen, I'm going to do a couple things out at the house real quick, and then I'm going to come in to get something to you.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm here. I'm not going in. I'm here until I'm here the rest of the day.
Okay.
At 4:30, I have to meet the Illinois faculty, the College of Aces.
Faculty. Yeah. That's today.
I'm facilitating with V. I'm way underqualified to be facilitating with V Chanu.
That's not true.
I think you're qualified to do that.
Here they go. It'll be fine. No, it should be a fun group. So
awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. See you tomorrow.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.